The kids are back to school and I'm back to 2 shows a week. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees, and boy, I'm going to need them today more than I probably ever have in weeks past. Welcome to week 14 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL season. And yes, if you tuned in and joined me last night for week 1 of the NFL live stream, I appreciate you very, very much. Take the opportunity, if you can, to check out that episode on the VOD. The podcast is now up as well. But look, we're still knee-deep in this CFL season, heading into week 14, about 2/3 of the way through the season now, or entering the 2/3 point of the season. Last week, you know what? It was looking better before the fourth quarter of the Calgary-Edmonton game. I was on pace maybe for a 7-5. And then that happened. So unfortunately, I wound up 5-7. A miraculous fourth quarter comeback from the Calgary Stampeders put me underwater for last week, which kind of sucked. Only 1-3 straight up, and I had been, hitting a nice little stride there straight up. But even money against the spread and even money on the totals at 2-2. So look, only 5-7. Obviously not where we want to be, but also not the end of the world. Another solid outing in CFL fantasy for me last week. Now 250 points across my last 2 weeks as I put up an even 107 in week 13. Good for just outside the top 1,500 overall and just outside the top 200 in Derek Taylor's league. On the season now, 1256.9, which puts me inside the top 420 and also inside the top 65 in Derek Taylor's league. So we're having an excellent season fantasy-wise. And speaking of an excellent season, or at least an excellent week, Toronto quarterback Chad Kelly gave me my MOP from week 13. 228 all-purpose yards for Chad Kelly, which doesn't jump off the page. 2 pass touchdowns. He did throw 2 interceptions, but he added a rush touchdown, good for 20.7 points, and the 2x multiplier as my team captain. So 41.4 points was the output for Chad Kelly, and it was more than enough for him to snag my MOP honors from week 13. That leads us directly into a week 14 slate of games, which features a pair of rematches from last week at the tail end of week 14. We kick off the week with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in Ottawa, taking on a REDBLACKS team coming into the game off of their bye. The Montreal Alouettes are in Toronto to take on the Argos. We have a rematch of Labor Day Classic matchups. Saskatchewan is in Winnipeg for the Banjo Bowl, Riders against the Bombers. And the Calgary Stampeders travel to Edmonton, a rematch of the Battle of Alberta, Stamps taking on the Elks. League-wide, it's official. I'm making it official right here and right now. Hashtag overseason has arrived. We are 75% to the over in the last 4 weeks. And in the last month, we got home teams that are really on fire here as well. 59% straight up, which is good. 71% against the spread, which is great for home teams over the past month. But yeah, over season, 100% here. I believe it's, 75%. It's 12 of the last 16 games. So of all the games over the last 4 weeks, 12 of them have gone over. I think there's only been 1 or 2 overtime games. So, the defenses have kind of taken a back seat, and these offenses are playing for keeps. So let's start things off in Ottawa with that Ticats REDBLACKS matchup. A back-and-forth, high-scoring second half for the Ticats last week. Ultimately, too little too late. They dropped a 2-possession loss in the Labor Day Classic against the Argos, the 3rd time these two teams have faced each other this season. And the second of those 3 that has been a double-digit win for the Toronto Argos. And you would have thought, facing a team for the 3rd time, you kind of know what they're going to bring. The Argos are a different animal, and the Ticats just didn't have the answer for that. But it was a massive showing for Taylor Powell at quarterback, 296 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He did throw a pick. And it's the second 100-yard game for Tim White in his last 3. He catches 8 balls for $110 and a touchdown. Obviously, it was not all rosy as the Ticats did lose the game. A big reason they did lose the game, they were blanked in the pass rush. They allowed Taylor Powell to be sacked 5 times in that game, did not generate a single sack of their own. Over the last 4 weeks, the Ticats have replaced the Edmonton Elks as the least efficient yardage team on offense in the last 4 games. Again, the Elks have completely turned things around, but the Ticats now sit at dead last in the CFL in offensive efficiency over their last 4 games, 16.8 yards per point. Once again, that ranks dead last in the CFL. On Ottawa's side, the REDBLACKS come off the bye at just 3-8, losers of 5 consecutive games. And they're not just losing these games, they're getting beat up by Vegas as well. Only 1 against the spread cover in those last 5 losses, but they're still only 1 game back in the East Division playoff race. This is going to come right down to the wire. At 3-8, they go on a streak here, win a couple straight games, they're going to be in good position. Back in Week 12, the Ticats lost a 10-point game to Edmonton. Of course, famously, Edmonton's first win at home since 2019. 0 touchdowns for Dustin Crum, or passing touchdowns, I should say, in back-to-back games, and just 3 passing touchdowns in his last 5. All 3 of those came in the same game. So you got 4 blanks and a 3-touchdown game. That 3-touchdown game is fun, but we certainly want to see more consistency from Crum and the pass game. We're not seeing it right now. Despite their quarterbacking struggles, Ottawa currently sits number 3 in offensive efficiency in the CFL over their last 4 games, but that's mostly through a lack of yardage. Like, they were only putting up 312 yards per game over that span, so even if you're only scoring 18, 19, 20 points, your efficiency does look better because your yardage numbers are so low. So yes, they're number 3, but this is, again, the context of that number is the efficiency is great, but the yardage certainly has not been there. Ottawa comes into this game as 2.5-point favorites at home. We got a point total of 47.5. Even though they're coming off their bye, and again, teams coming off their bye have had a lot of success in the CFL this season, I don't think the REDBLACKS are the better of these 2 teams. I think right now, with the way they're playing, even though Hamilton did lose last week, I think Hamilton is the better of these 2 football teams. I trust Taylor Powell right now a little bit more than I trust Dustin Crum. Both of these quarterbacks can run the ball. I think the Ticats have better weapons. I'm going to take Hamilton here on the road in a slight upset. But I'm going to take the Ticats on the road. I think they're the better team. I think they get the job done. Let's take the Ticats on the road in Ottawa to get the win over the REDBLACKS. So obviously, since I like Hamilton to win, give me the plus 2.5 on the Ticats as well. Total in the game set at 47.5, like I mentioned, and even though it is #overseason officially now, I think this is the game this week that is the most likely to stay under its point total, because we don't exactly have 2 offenses that are lighting the league on fire. Like I said, Ottawa top 3 in efficiency, but they're not getting a ton of yardage. Hamilton, least efficient offense in football. Their defenses, both of these teams, on an efficiency perspective, are doing fairly well. I think this game stays under. We're going to stay under the 47.5 point total. Give me like a 23-20 final for the Ticats. Hamilton wins. Hamilton covers the plus 2.5, and give me the under on 47.5 points. Off to Toronto now, where the Argos are going to play host to a Montreal Alouettes team who dropped their 2nd straight multi-score game, losing by 9 points to BC. That game was in Montreal. In another offensive line disappearing act, we'll call it. 5 sacks allowed by the Alouettes to the BC Lions. They've allowed their quarterback to get sacked 11 times in their last 3 games. I just have to shout out my favorite moment from that game last week, the Montreal-BC game. William Stanback rumbling for that 68-yard touchdown in the 4th quarter. That was shades of his best days. You look at that run and you go, oh, I remember that guy. Like, that guy has been a monster over the last couple of years, and it was shades of his best moments. He put up 102 yards rushing on just 8 carries, including that 69-yard score. And Austin Mack is, of course, still a monster. 7 catches for $143 and a receiving touchdown. But the Alouettes go 0 for 3 in the red zone in that game. 0 red zone touchdowns in their last 2 weeks, and a pair of interceptions from Cody Fajardo. That kind of sunk them. The Alouettes currently sit as a bottom 3 team over the last 4 weeks in terms of defensive efficiency. They were only at a 12.6 last week, actually an improvement on their 12.2 on average over the last 4. You want big number here on defense for defensive efficiency. You want to force your opposition to have to put up more yards to score a point on average than put up less yards, and that's just not what the Alouettes. It's not really what any team in the CFL is doing right now. Like, scoring has just blown up over the last month, but you couple that with a middling offensive efficiency of just 13.8, and that's not going to make up for the fact that teams are not having to work very hard to score on you. On the Toronto Argos side, the rebound is real after that Week 9 loss, scoring their 3rd straight win convincingly. So they lost back in Week 9, their only loss of the season. They've reeled off 3 straight wins, scoring 124 points in that span. Team doesn't like losing. But despite those 3 straight wins, Chad Kelly's kind of sloppy play has continued through to last week. 2 touchdown passes, but 2 interceptions, and that was on just 23 pass attempts. So that is a lot of peak and valley from your quarterback in his pass attempts. 5 interceptions for Chad Kelly in his past 3 games, but variety stays the spice of life for the Toronto Argos. 5 different touchdown scorers, plus a touchdown pass from the most interesting man in sports, AJ Ouellette. And quite frankly, like, you look at the results and you just look at the games. Who slows this offense down? Outside of that one game where Chad Kelly got injured and didn't finish the game, no one has held the Argos under 31 points this season, and their efficiency has been elite all season long. I've taken efficiency measurements 6 different times this season. And all 6 of those times, on offense, the Argos have been between 9.7 and 12.7. Yes, that's 3 yards of difference, but all of those are elite. Like, all of those are like top 2, top 3, just across the board, and that's where they've been. That's just who this offense is, and I don't know in this league who stops them. This week, I can't see the Montreal Alouettes being the team to stop them. Again, they're one of the least efficient defenses in the league over the last 4. I think this is a definite win for the Toronto Argos, so we are very heavily on the home Argos in this matchup. Toronto gets the win over Montreal. On the line, the Argos are laying the most points of the week at -10.5. It's a lot of points to lay. I think I gotta lay those points. Like, nobody's keeping them under 30. And their defense is playing relatively well. And I certainly don't see Montreal's offense keeping them under 30. If you see Toronto get to, 350 yards, Montreal's going to be in trouble here. Toronto could hit 40. So we're going to lay the -10.5 on the Argos. Total in this game set at 51.5 points. It is the largest total of the week. I still think we go over on this one. I do think Montreal scores their points. We know Toronto's going to score theirs. So let's go over 51.5 points in Montreal-Toronto. Let's go Argos 38, Alouettes 24. High scoring game. Argos win, Argos cover, and give me the over on the points. Halfway home now in the Week 14 episode, and I'll take this opportunity, as I always do, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees and Coffee Bean, who are doing a great job right now of keeping my vocal cords active. Nerdtees.ca. You want to go there to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea, estate coffee, and flavored coffee blends. Whatever the taste palette of yourself or whoever you're buying for, you're going to find something great on nerdtees.ca, just like this, which is one of my favorite dessert teas. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Black Forest cake, tasty and delicious, and one of just a bunch of incredible options that you can find at nerdtees.ca. And when you go to that website, you want to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That's going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100. Or if you're one of my viewers in the US, first of all, thank you for supporting the CFL, but you're also going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar from nerdtees.ca. Promo code BWFinest, get your free shipping, save your 15%, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. All right, time to hit these rematches, folks. 2 rematches from last week, and we will start with the Banjo Bowl. The Riders last week surviving a late second half comeback by the Bombers and get the defensive play that they needed in overtime for their biggest win of 2023. Riders get the win last week over the Bombers. Jake Dolegala in that game going for 300 yards passing for the first time in his CFL career, but it was a pair of Antonio Pipkin 1-yard touchdown runs. How large now does that signing, or that trade I believe it was, how large does that look with him putting a couple of touchdowns on the board, and a perfect 5-for-5 night from Nova Scotian kicker Brett Lowther that made the difference and led the Riders to that win. All was not rosy, however, for the Riders coming out of that game. Obviously, we have the Pete Robertson headbutt suspension situation. He is not going to be playing in this game this week. And the starting right tackle for the Riders, Colin Kelly, injuring his knee. I believe he's got some ligament damage there. That might be the season for him. That does deplete the Riders on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And for a team that right now is the least efficient defense in the CFL, any kind of depletion is bad news, much less in the pass rush. If you can't pressure Zach Collaros, get in Zach Collaros' face, disrupt that pass offense, the potential is there for this to be a long night. On Winnipeg's side in that game, Zach Collaros, throwing his 8th interception in his last 6 games, has at least one in all 6 of those games, has thrown 10 picks in 275 pass attempts. This is in comparison to last season, where he threw 13, but in 436 pass attempts. So the rate of interception has gone way up on Zach Collaros this year. His completion percentage is down 2.5%. He's around 67.5%, where he's been 70 in back-to-back seasons. In a game like last week, it was looking like the fact that Brady Oliveira had 2 rush touchdowns, and again, the diversity of the pass offense was kind of going to cover that up. But Zach Collaros not exactly playing like Zach Collaros in the last few weeks, much less disciplined with the ball than he normally is. I talked about that injury to the Riders starting right tackle. The pass rush needs to eat for the Bombers in this game. They had 3 sacks of Jake Dolegala last week. You should be looking for 5 or more in this game this week, missing the starting right tackle, and that's going to crank that defensive efficiency for the Bombers back up to expectations, because right now the Bombers are kind of middling. They are only number 6 in the CFL over the last 4 games in terms of defensive efficiency. Now, they're not giving up a ton of yardage, but they've allowed 24 points a game for that yardage. So not where you expect their efficiency to be, but this game can go a long way to changing that. I still firmly believe that Mike O'Shea's unit is the best coached team in the CFL, and I think if you give them a second consecutive look at a team, it's going to be a different ball game. So we're definitely on Winnipeg in this matchup. Let's take the Bombers at home to get the win over the Riders, especially given, the key constrictions and depletion that they have in their roster due to injury and suspension. So the Bombers currently laying 8.5 points at home. I was expecting a double-digit lay in this one, but I guess based on Sasky winning that game last week, it kind of caused them to go a little lower on that. I'm perfectly fine laying -8.5 here on the Bombers. They are the better football team top to bottom. I think they show that in this rematch in their home building. I'm going to go ahead and lay the -8.5. Total in the game set at 48.5 points. I think this comfortably gets into the 50s, might even push 60. So let's go ahead and grab over 48.5 points in Winnipeg, Saskatchewan. We're going to go Bombers 34, Riders 23. Bombers win, Bombers cover, and give me the over on the 48.5 point total, which leads us into our last game, the rematch of the Battle of Alberta, Calgary visiting Edmonton. And in this game last week, old bad habits rear their ugly heads for the Elks, punting a 15-point fourth quarter lead despite a 272 all-purpose yards effort from Trey Ford at quarterback for the Elks. On Calgary side of things, Jake Maier with no touchdown passes for the 5th time in his last 6 games, but he does go over 300 yards passing now in back-to-back games. For the Stamps, he did add a rush touchdown as well, so he did put points on the board. In fact, there were 3 different touchdown runners for the Calgary Stampeders in that game. Mayer joined by Dedrick Mills and Tommy Stevens as the backup quarterback. Calgary's run defense got diced up in that game for 239 yards rushing, the majority of those actually coming from Trey Ford at the quarterback position. But desperation is going to trump statistics in a lot of instances. Calgary, a desperate team, they badly needed this win, and despite being basically the lowest efficiency team in the CFL in terms of, offense plus defense, the least efficient team in the CFL over the last 4 games, they were the desperate team. They made that comeback happen, and the Elks kind of handed it to them too. We're talking about a total defensive collapse for Edmonton in the fourth quarter of that game. The Elks only forcing 4 incomplete passes from Jake Mayer in the fourth quarter, and 2 of those they gave back on defensive pass interference penalties, which in fact gifted Calgary a first down. In one case, it was a deep play to Luther Hakunavanu, I believe. He, got fouled. It's DPI, and it totally flipped field position. And all the momentum, Calgary was just running downhill that entire fourth quarter. Edmonton panicked. They had no answer for it. That's a coaching thing. I've criticized Chris Jones plenty this year. That's a coaching thing. It's also a reminder that, this Elks team is far from unbeatable. I know I certainly got my, Trey Ford era armor on, but, this Elks team is still what they are. They're better. They're certainly better than what they were. They are still the Elks at their core. But due to that wild league-wide scoring spike that we've seen in the last month or so, by the numbers, the Elks defense is actually the most efficient in the CFL over the last 4 games. So this might be revealing the limitations of the efficiency statistic. But the numbers don't lie. It takes more yardage on average for Elks opponents to put a point on the board than it does against anybody else. They're the only team in the CFL where right now it's taking 15 yards to put a point on the board. So the numbers are what they are. I need to see that shine this week for the Edmonton Elks to feel like they've really taken that step forward defensively. While I don't necessarily know that that's what we see, I do genuinely believe that the Edmonton Elks have the potential to be the better football team between these two. And I'm going to take the Elks to get this win. They're a very marginal favorite at home at -1.5, which means I'm going to lay the -1.5 because it's less than 2 points. But I'm going to take the Elks to win this game. I have belief. I have belief in Trey Ford. I have belief in what this offense is doing now, certainly compared to what they were doing earlier in the season, which it is absolute night and day. But I also have some belief in this defense that they have been playing better. They just ran into a situation last week that they didn't have the answer for, and that's just as much on their coaches as it is on them. Let's take the Elks to win this game outright. I'm going to lay the -1.5 on Edmonton, and the total, I am going to skew over on this total. It's 48.5 points. The league's just scoring right now. Both of these teams have almost identical offensive efficiency, even though Calgary's not really putting up the yardage over their last 4 games. They have been putting up the points to go along with that. So I think this just ekes over. Let's go 28-24 in favor of the Edmonton Elks. Elks win, Elks cover. Give me the over on the points. There you go, folks. Those are your picks for Week 14. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I've got the Hamilton Ticats going into Ottawa, scoring a 23-20 victory over the REDBLACKS, taking +2.5 on Hamilton as the dog, and staying under the 47.5 point total. I got the Toronto Argos beating the Montreal Alouettes 38-24 in Toronto. Let's lay the -10.5 on the Argos and take over the 51.5 point total. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers getting revenge for last week, beating the Saskatchewan Roughriders 34-23 in the Banjo Bowl. I'm going to lay minus 8.5 on the Bombers and go over the 48.5 point total. And I got the Edmonton Elks avenging their loss last week in the Battle of Alberta, picking up a 28-24 win over the Calgary Stampeders to close week 14, laying minus 1.5 on the Edmonton Elks and taking over the 48.5 point total. So, I have not had the opportunity to look at CFL Fantasy for this week. What I will say for sure, I'm going to underspend as much as humanly possible on the defensive side. It might be regardless. I might just spend min money on the defense because look, the offenses are clicking, points are scoring, points are bountiful right now. So what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm just going to be stacking as many of those high-end offensive players as possible because that's where I think the fantasy points are. So minimum money on defense this week. Probably going to look at either, Chad Kelly, or I might even look at Trey Ford one more time at quarterback. Receivers, probably just try to stack with my quarterbacks. Running backs, I think James Butler is like a slam dunk. Like put him in there basically every week now until the end of the season. I might just roll Butler and Oliveira one more time and see what that gets me. They're obviously cooking with gas. So I don't have my actual lineup. My lineup will be in the top comment down below once I set it. But that is it for week 14. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. I might go have a nap because I got to go to work in a few hours, and this has been a lot of talking and a lot of recording over a relatively short period of time. But thank you so much for taking the time to check in with this show, as well as week 1 of the NFL, the live stream that happened last night. Thank you so much. Enjoy the games in week 14. We'll see you again in week 15.